On the way to the church where we'd end up staying in Dubois, we saw flyers for the local rodeo that happened to be every Friday. Nate and I both thought, today's Friday, so we have to go. Guardian and a bicyclist named John were also staying in the church for the first night. Neither wanted to join us at the rodeo though. Nate had never been to a rodeo, so yes, this was his first rodeo. I'd been to a bunch while growing up in Santa Clarita, California. It was cool being the rodeo expert as far as Nate was concerned. The announcer did little bits during the events. One of his go-dos was calling out states like, "Who's from Idaho? Idahoans, make some noise." Late in the show was his big payoff for the gag. "Who's here from California? Do you dare admit it?" When he got a quiet woohoo from someone else in the crowd, he said, "Welcome to America." Feel free to jump forward because I'm about to go on a rant. At the beginning of the rodeo, when the announcer asked, I stood up, took off my hat, put my hand over my heart when the colors were presented. I said amen when the opening prayer was read. I served my country as an Army infantryman. I grew up in an agricultural community. California is the biggest agricultural exporter of any state. I didn't go to a rodeo every Friday, but I did when it came to the town for Frontier Days. Before somebody claims California is in America, they should walk from Mexico to Oregon up the middle of the state. That being said, in a way, the announcer is more American than I am. Because of the messed up electoral system, as a member of the least populous state, his vote was worth more than mine. I guess that's one way to protect the minority. I guess you just got to be the right kind of minority to be protected. End rant. The second day in Dubois was spent editing the last video and doing town chores. Dubois' main drag was a hive of activity. On the way to the grocery store, I checked out the world's largest jackalope exhibit. There's an old mine right in the middle of town. The local restaurant has a competition where if you drink a 16-ounce beer out of a 30-pound mug, it's free. You guessed right, I paid full price.
Oh my God, nope.
The Rustic Pine Tavern has a ripping party. At the church, Guardian shared his itinerary for crossing Yellowstone with us, which we intended to copy, but no one answered the Yellowstone backcountry permit number on Saturday or Sunday morning. We figured we'd have to call on Monday while we were on the trail. A couple who came into town for a Sunday morning breakfast picked us up. They gave us a ride back to where a trail that is simply called Old CDT Alt crossed Highway 26. This cut off some of the red line. I upped my bug spray game to 100% DEET. Take that, mosquitoes. The trail was hard to follow until we got to a dirt road that brought us to the first point of interest, Brooks Lake Lodge and Spa. An employee and pass-through hiker encouraged us to drop by for power, Wi-Fi, and a soda via a far-out comment. Thanks to the Wi-Fi, I was able to call Julie. This would be the last time we'd have signal until we got to Old Faithful. At the lake, we joined a trail that seemed to be mostly used by horses. This sign warned us about the water coming up. The toxins created by a cyanobacteria can't be filtered, boiled, or otherwise treated out of water. I got behind Nate during my call with Julie. I caught up at this lake where Nate had gone in for a bit. Right where we joined the CDT, I ran into two old cowboys and their 5 equines. The trail through these high bushes might have not given horses trouble, but they sure gave me trouble. The South Buffalo Fork River crossing was tough because it was pretty deep and quite swift. It didn't help that it started to rain. I tried using my rain jacket as a cape because wearing it properly would just make me sweat like crazy and get me wet anyway. We camped at an old ranger cabin after a 22-mile day. It was a great spot because it had a bear box that made food storage easy. The sky was clear when I went to bed. I could see the moon through my tent's netting. But at 5 a.m. I woke up to a rainstorm and then to a horrible wind. Just as we should have been stirring, nature was saying, "Sleep in." It calmed down around 6:30, so we got going around 7:30. I started out wearing my cape, but of course Nate made fun of me. We were hiking in a burn zone in the evening and again in the morning. It was surprising that the trees around the cabin were healthy. We hiked by an encampment that seemed to be like we had traveled back in time, if it weren't for the kid's t-shirt. Entering Tuolumne Meadows on the PCT, I was shocked by the number of these parallel trails caused by people trying to avoid the mud. But here put those trails in Yosemite to shame. There was as many as 11 side by side. They are probably created really fast when a wrangler walks a whole train of animals across the meadow. A member of one of these two big treks we passed bragged that they'd been in the backcountry for 8 days. That's a lot of gear for camping. Nate found this great spot to rest while we could watch the water swirl by. The trail went right by the parting of the waters. This is Two Oceans Creek. Here the creek splits. Half goes to the Atlantic Ocean, and the other half goes to the Pacific. The horses and the other pack animals really do a number on the trail. On the climb up to the summit and the high point of the day, I ran into this butterfly. Google says it is a common blue, but it doesn't seem common to me. At the summit, I found it to be cool, breezy, and drizzly. I put on my rain jacket while I rested just for the warmth. I never put my sunglasses on all day. The sun never came out, but only really rained at the very beginning of the day and at the end. I was pretty exhausted after a 25-mile day. I could really feel the extra 4 miles in the 1,500 feet over the previous day. In the tent, after the rain stopped, it got cold, like see your breath cold. Weird for July 27th and only at 8,000 feet. In the morning, there was frost on the grass. The day was only going to be 20 miles and only 1,500 feet of elevation gain. So, my plan was to sleep in and hope that the sun would hit my tent and dry it out. Unfortunately, I was right next to the forest, and the sun was going to take forever to get that high. I didn't get going until 8. Not long after leaving camp, I entered Yellowstone, and since I hadn't had cell reception since the ranch on Sunday, I did so without a permit. Since the grass was all wet, my pants and shoes were all wet, so I had no reason to switch into my camp shoes at water crossings. Nate didn't try to wait for the sun in the morning, so it took me a while to catch up to him. Speaking of water crossings, I followed the Snake River for much of the day, so I had to cross the Snake River just like Evel Knievel.
My name is Evel Knievel. I'm a professional daredevil.
Whoa, it looks like a good one.
In 1974, Evel Knievel attempted to clear Snake River Canyon.
When I cut over to the Snake River, to Heart River, I crossed a really big meadow. It was so long and straight and unchanging, it seemed as if I was road walking. In the meadow, grasshoppers began attacking me, just like in New Mexico. Fighter jets zooming around north of us reminded me of the area north of Cottonwood Pass on the PCT, where I kept being buzzed by the jet fighters. To get to some potential campsites on the shore of Heart Lake, we had a long stretch of beach to follow. The first site was claimed by an angry German lady, but the second was occupied by Tangent and Hypotenuse. They were happy to share their site with us. Sunrise on the lake was magical. Here are our first Yellowstone geyser. The prize of the morning was Witch Creek. It was just 1.5 miles into my day. At 7:20, the temperature was perfect. I stayed in there for 20 minutes. When I got out, I felt like a noodle, way past al dente. Best hot spring of any trail so far. Better than Kern Hot Springs, better than Deep Creek, better than Gila Hot Springs, better than Tatopani. I passed a beautiful pool just off the trail. It was probably what fed into Witch Creek. Later, I saw some more thermal activity. Climbing LA Valley, I looked back at our campsite on the shore and its nearby geyser. As I approached the parking lot, I passed a couple of rangers that said hi. They got me thinking about our no camping reservation situation. It occurred to me that Julie could probably get our camping reservation if I communicated with her via my Garmin. I started the slow back and forth process. Not long afterwards, I caught up to Nate. He was chatting with a ranger. The jig was up. Ranger Alex was really keen on giving us a citation, though he wasn't very good at it. It took him forever. Later at a water crossing where we were talking to Beans and Botch, he came running up. He had made a mistake and he had to issue the citations again. Despite everything, Ranger Alex was really nice and kind of a CDT hiker fan. We still didn't have a permit, so another ranger could theoretically give us a citation, but they probably wouldn't if they contacted the backcountry permit office via radio. Shortly after the water crossing, the trail disappeared, but we found the side trail that did the trick. Our plan was to stay at a campsite on Firehole Springs, which was north of Shoshone Lake, but first we had to traverse the lake's drainage, which was a sloppy mess. It was amazing how close the trail gets to thermal activity near the Minuteman Geyser. The geyser is named that because it goes off every minute.
In California, there'd be signs all over this place to make sure you don't get sued. Oh my God. The trail's kind of close, don't you think?
The mosquitoes were bad, so at camp we just jumped right into our tents. We emerged early because we'd be visiting Old Faithful for breakfast. We saw the Lone Star Geyser on the way, but it didn't feel like spouting off for us. We arrived at Old Faithful Snow Lodge at about 8:30 and hit the breakfast buffet. The main lodge is amazing.
Keep looking at all the new. I mean, they wiped out a forest building this, but still, it's so cool.
We watched Old Faithful do its thing before resupplying at the general store. We let our tents dry as we waited for the second Old Faithful show. On our way back to the trail, we got lunch. The trail followed boardwalks for a while, so we were like regular tourists.
Yeah. Beauty and chromat. Oh. Last time it erupted was about a month ago.
Spooky feeling in here that a bear was going to pop out, but none did. We met pit stop on the climb up to Summit Lake campsite. The climb was the toughest of the day. We stayed at the campsite just long enough to say hello to a couple of Sobo hikers, get water, and say goodbye to pit stop. Our plan was to camp in Idaho. We'd be passing right through the zone of death. The zone is the inspiration for the train station on the show Yellowstone. The Sixth Amendment to the Constitution states a jury of peers has to be taken from the state and federal district where a crime is committed. Well, no one lives in the 2.5-mile wide section of Idaho portion of the Yellowstone Federal District. Therefore, theoretically, no one can be prosecuted for a crime committed in the zone of death. You can learn more about the zone of death in Tom Scott's enlightening video on the topic. Since we still didn't have a permit, technically we committed a crime in the zone of death. Shortly after we got up, we left the park. The trail that day was often made up of this black gravel. It took me a while, but I noticed that the black gravel was ground up, low-quality obsidian. It was a hot, dry day with few water sources. Towards the end of the day, we entered Montana, the last state of the CDT, but we also re-entered Idaho. You see, the trail creeped along the border. Back in Montana, I waited for Nate. Where he caught up to me, we jumped on a bike trail that would take us all the way to West Yellowstone. The path was an old railway line that used to take visitors to the park. We stealth camped between the path and the South Fork of the Madison River, just a few miles short of West Yellowstone. In the morning, we had some time to kill before Nate's parents could arrive. Of course, we got breakfast. The rest of the time was spent at the Grizzly and Wolf Discovery Center. We saw our first grizzlies and hopefully the last on the CDT.
Oh, there he is. Yeah, that's a good video.
Snake count, 8. I added 2 more to the count this section. I think they were both whip snakes. One wiggled into the grass here, and the other was on this patch of dirt before it disappeared. Trail stop checklist. Old Faithful, check. Wyoming complete. The zone of death, check. Well, that's not really a trail stop, but Idaho complete. West Yellowstone, check.